this episode of Questions with Father, we address a sensitive topic that has generated discussion across traditional Catholic circles, the issue of conditional ordination. Father Paul Robinson responds to objections surrounding the Society of St. Pius X's decision not to conditionally ordain every priest ordained in the Novus Ordo Rite who joins the society. Why doesn't the SSPX reordain across the board? What did Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre actually do and teach on this matter? We address the principles behind the Society's approach, common misunderstandings about sacramental theology, and probably most importantly, the real dangers of overreacting to uncertainty. It's a clear, thoughtful conversation aimed at one thing: peace of soul and fidelity to the Church's tradition. This podcast is free to listen to and always will be, but if you can help with a one-time or a small monthly recurring donation on sspxpodcast.com, you'll be making sure that we can continue this work of producing good Catholic content on a regular basis. So now let's join Father Paul Robinson for why the SSPX doesn't always conditionally ordain. Father Robinson, great to have you back and for this episode of Questions with Father. How are you doing?
Doing well, Andrew. Last time we talked, I believe we had switched chairs.
Yes. And
now it's back to you grilling me.
Very, very happy that is the case. I got a little taste of what you did, and I didn't like it, so I'm okay with it.
It was a fun time. It was a fun time.
It was good. It was fun. It was fun to do that with you.
Yeah. You
came up recently, Father, kind of as a supporting character in the interview that we did, and we released a couple weeks ago or so with Father Fulton. The diocesan priest who recently came over to the SSPX and is going to be stationed down here in Phoenix. You were the one, Father, is it right, that is running the priest training program that we spoke about in that interview series, and you're here today to clear up some things, right?
That's correct. So Father Fulton did his interview, and he's extremely popular. I mean, it's just a fascinating story. Father Fulton's very well spoken. And it's very encouraging, I think, for everybody to see a Novus Ordo priest make that journey. And of course, we're praying that other priests would make that journey in the future. And so a lot of people have seen the interview, but there's a certain number of people who were not so happy because they were worried about Father's ordination. And they're saying, oh, well, did you conditionally ordain him? You shouldn't have him go to a SSPX chapel unless he's been conditionally ordained in the old rite, and so on and so forth. So I thought it would be good for us to just do a Questions with Father where I address this topic of conditional ordinations and the practice of the SSPX. So it is our practice in the SSPX to study each ordination case by case. So we have a long history of priests coming to us, and we don't just automatically conditionally ordain them, but rather we look at the circumstances of their ordination and make a decision based on that. So the reason why we do this is because we hold to two things. We do believe that the new rites are valid. We don't like the new rites. We obviously don't like the new Mass. We're famous for saying that the new Mass is bad. But we do believe that the new Mass is valid. So it's a valid rite. And I believe Father McFarland gave a podcast specifically on the new rites of ordination and Episcopal consecration in the Christ in the Church series. So I would refer people to that for more of the theological consideration of this question of the conditional ordination. So we believe that the new rites are valid. And then secondly, we believe that you need to have serious grounds before repeating a non-repeatable sacrament. So the three sacraments that confer a character and indelible mark, and because of that fact, they're only given once, and that's baptism, confirmation, and priestly ordination. So if you repeat those sacraments, you have to have serious grounds. You have to have what's called a positive doubt that the original conferral of the sacrament was not valid. So that's our practice. Yet there are sort of a minority of people who go to our chapels that practice does not sit well with them, and they want us to just across the board, always conditionally ordain the priests who come to us. Basically, they want us to either change our principles and take the sedevacantist position that the new rites are invalid, or to say that they are sufficiently doubtful that we should conditionally ordain in every case. So the purpose of this podcast is for us to kind of look at some of the things, the arguments that people give as to why we should do this. And you, Mr. Andrew Latham, are going to be the devil's advocate.
I can do that.
Yeah.
I've got my horns on, ready to go.
So you're going to hit me with some objections, and I'm going to try to address some of these arguments that people make.
Yeah. And if I could, Father, one thing that I was thinking about while we were prepping for this and while you gave me some notes, I was thinking of something that I always tell high school students of mine that I teach. I'm going to teach you the truth no matter where it goes. I have no agenda other than the truth. So, like Father said, this isn't just a gotcha. This isn't, well, we just don't really like the people who are making these objections, so therefore we're going to defend our position and kind of dig trench. This is just the truth, and some people may not like it. Some people do, but there's no motive here other than let's explain why the SSPX does what it does and where the principles are, right?
Yeah. And the last thing people want is for us to change our principles.
Right.
So we have these principles. We stuck to them for over 50 years. God willing, we will continue to stick to them. So we definitely don't want to cave to pressure and start, thinking differently because of, crowdsourcing our opinions.
Right. Okay. So there's a few points here. The first objection would be, and I've seen this online on the Father Fulton and other places. The objection would be Archbishop Lefebvre always conditionally ordained new rite priests before he allowed them to celebrate Mass in SSPX chapels, inferring here that Archbishop Lefebvre did something and now you, Father Robinson, 50 years later, 30 years later, whatever, you're changing what the Archbishop did and you're not following him.
Yes. And I mean, and this is an easy objection to answer because it's just not true. Archbishop Lefebvre did not conditionally reordain all the priests who came to him. He sort of set this line for the SSPX of investigating each individual case. And there was a very key moment in the history of the SSPX in the United States in 1983 when there were 9 American SSPX priests who were holding to sedevacantism. And they were, specifically, at the seminary in Ridgefield, the rector, Father Sanborn, at the time, he was teaching the seminarians that basically the new rites were no good, and that these the priests who came to us from Novus Ordo needed to be conditionally ordained across the board. So Archbishop Lefebvre had to address this situation, ended up expelling the 9 sedevacantist priests from the SSPX, and yes, and I mean, we certainly, since that time, we don't accept that position, in the SSPX, of sedevacantism. It just, does not work out. So when the Archbishop came to the seminary to deal with the situation, he gave a number of conferences to the seminarians. And in one of these seminarians, he brought up the case of Father Stark, who was a Jesuit, and Archbishop Lefebvre had said, I'm not going to conditionally ordain him. I have no problem with his ordination. And the sedevacantist priest had a problem with that. So Archbishop Lefebvre said in this conference, Father Stark said himself, my ordination is good. I am sure he is a priest. He's been a priest for 11 years now. I think he's a very intelligent man, not just because he's a Jesuit, but certainly because he's a very intelligent man. He was a professor. He said to me, my word, someone is discussing the validity of my ordination. They discuss, no, his ordination is not valid. Well, that is the reason I said to you yesterday or the day before that we must do an inquisition to know what the situation really is in this case, not in all cases in general, but in this case to see if his ordination is valid or invalid. And I I am responsible and I make the decision. I can say to him, you must be reordained. Otherwise, if I think that his ordination is valid, really valid, then I have no right to repeat the sacrament. If the sacrament was valid, then I have no right to repeat it. So I think in this conference, the Archbishop is expressing two main things. The first thing is that the faithful have to understand is that really the one upon whom this decision rests is the bishop, the one who's doing the ordination. And he has to make a decision before God, and he has the grace of state to make that decision. He's the one that has the power from the line of succession from the apostles. He's the one who's going to be imposing the hands. And he has to make a very careful decision before God. He doesn't want to disrespect the sacrament. He doesn't want to go against the sacramental theology of the church. And he has been trained in the sacramental theology. So he has the theological learning to assess whether matter, form, and intention were present in that rite. And he has to, it's going to be on his conscience, as to what he decides to do. So, when we have a new priest, who comes to us, we typically receive the ordination video. And then I send that on to Father Fullerton and Bishop Fillet, and they make the judgment, and they assess what they think. So, they're definitely very capable of making the right decision. So it's it's just not the position of the faithful to tell us what to do in that case, because we are the ones who have to be responsible for that, just as we have to be responsible for what we say in the confessional or what we say from the pulpit and how we guide the faithful. So it's just I guess one of the purposes here is just to say this is our position, and you can agree with it or not agree with it. Right. But that's what it is. So if you come to our chapels, it's just expected that you're going to accept the priest that we have say mass. So we have say public mass and trust that we're making good decisions. We're vetting these priests. We're assessing the ordinations and making the right decision whether to ordain them again or not. And, we're not going to publicize that. We're not going to say this priest over here was conditionally ordained. This priest over there was not conditionally ordained, because it just creates complications. The faithful is like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to mass to this priest, whereas I am going to go to mass to that priest, that sort of thing. So the second thing that the Archbishop points out in this text is that it is gravely sinful to repeat a sacrament that gives an indelible character without sufficient grounds for doing so. It's disrespectful to the sacrament, and it's a danger to the faith. It's actually a danger to the faith, because you're implying that this sacrament, in fact, is repeatable if you don't have serious grounds. And you're opening the door to a lot of problems with basically repeating sacraments all the time for no reason.
Yeah. And that's kind of to the point of what you were saying earlier about positive doubt. You have to have a specific smoking gun, which I guess we'll talk about here in a minute. We'll dive into that in more detail, but you have to have a specific reason why you would want to do it. Not just, well, I don't know. Not just, I don't trust. There's got to be something that tells you there's something wrong here before you potentially redo a sacrament that has an indelible mark, because otherwise that's just cheapening the sacrament.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the positive doubt is when you have some fact that's associated with the performance of the sacrament that that engenders a doubt in your mind.
Okay.
And the negative doubt is just, in general, I don't know if it's valid or invalid, but I just want to repeat the sacrament. I have no information that would tell me, whether it's valid or invalid. So we just want to repeat the sacrament.
Right. The other kind of interesting point that you made was, and generally, Father, you and I are not a fan of clericalism, and that's a word that gets thrown around way too much anyway.
Yes.
But this is a good point where, hey, John Doe, SSPX chapel attendee, you're not trained in this. Sorry. I bet you've read a lot of stuff online, and I bet you have really strong feelings about this. I do too. All of us do. Like we're in the crisis in the church for a reason. And this is awful. The crisis is, I get it. We have doubts. We have lots of concerns. Understandable. But this is a matter where sometimes we faithful try to be more traditional than the SSPX, which is kind of interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, what I do understand is there's a lack of trust today.
Yeah.
The church has lost credibility. Priests have lost credibility. There's scandals everywhere, and that's understandable. But at a certain point, the faithful have to pursue a peace of soul where they just say, okay, I have enough information to where I can trust these priests. And hopefully they reach a point where they say, well, I feel comfortable at the SSPX chapels, that my faith is not going to be undermined, and that these priests and these bishops are truly wanting to help me save my soul. And at that point, they just say, well, if they put this priest forward to be celebrating public masses and so on, I trust that they've done their job, and it's not a question of like you completely turned a blind eye to everything, Right. I mean, if there's something extreme that happens and that raises a red flag, of course, and I know people contact Father Fulton all the time with, it's like, hey, Father, this happened or that happened or some complaint. And there's always that recourse. And that's a good thing about the SSPX is there's a hierarchy and there's a way to make things known to the superiors. But the point is for the man in the pew, he should be comfortable with just saying, well, the responsibility for these decisions is upon these men who have been willing to step forward to become priests, and in the case of Bishop Flay, a bishop, and therefore take responsibility for these decisions.
Yeah. That was the Father Stark issue. So I'm going to go back on the other side and be the devil's advocate again for a second. That was the Father Stark issue. There's another.
Let me just mention as well that there was another priest, Father Glover, who Archbishop Lefebvre did not conditionally ordain. So I know of at least two cases where Archbishop Lefebvre did not conditionally ordain. Yeah. So please go ahead with your devil advocating.
Yeah, you bet. So 5 years later, there's a letter written in 1988. And it's around on places online, and we'll post these in some of the notes and et cetera. There's a letter that Archbishop Lefebvre wrote. It says, thank you for your kind letter. He's talking to a Mr. Wilson. I agree with your desire to reordain conditionally these priests, and I've done this reordination many times. He also says all the sacraments from the modernist bishops or priests are doubtful now. The changes are increasing and their intentions are no more Catholics. We're in the time of great apostasy. So this letter seems to contradict, if you read it at face value, what Archbishop Lefebvre had previously said in 1983 about Father Stark and Father Glover. He's saying, hey, these sacraments are doubtful now. We're in a time of great apostasy. I agree with your desire to reordain conditionally these people. Mm-hmm. Did Archbishop Lefebvre change his mind, or?
No, he didn't change his mind. So he did consider the new rites to be doubtful, not invalid, but doubtful. So what is meant by that is that the new rites are constructed in such a way that they are ambiguous. So, they can be, depending on your intention, they can be directed towards the Catholic faith, or they can be directed towards Protestantism. This is one of the arguments of the Ottaviani intervention about the new Mass. It's saying that, for instance, the the consecration of the context of the consecration in the new Mass is of a narrative. I mean, it's even the language that is used. This is the consecration narrative, or it's mentioned as the narrative of the institution. And the thing is, if a priest simply wants to give a narration of a past event, if that's his mindset, then he doesn't consecrate if he's not wanting to perform a sacrament. If I went to say Mass and I was saying to myself, I just want to give a narration of a past event, not to consecrate, then I would not consecrate.
Right.
So, because these rites, they can be taken in multiple directions. The explicit intention of the Church is not embedded in these rites, but it's more ambiguous. There's more burden on the priest to make that intention explicit. So that was Archbishop Lefebvre's position, and was the reason why he said we need to look at these ordinations on a case-by-case basis, so that we can look and see, is there something in the way the rite was done that would indicate that this bishop did not intend to make priests as the Church understands it. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that Archbishop Lefebvre, when he's expressing that he says these sacraments are doubtful. I think that's what he said. These sacraments are, doubtful now. Would it be fair to say that what he's expressing is this general sense of negative doubt of, they're so ambiguous. They are so kind of stripped of that real formal intent that, all of them have this negative doubt now. And then what he's saying is we need to then look at each one of these. And if we see positive doubt, that is, if we see something that is that smoking gun, then we, conditionally reordain. But if we don't see that smoking gun, then the negative doubt is not enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't say that in the letter, but it was just a private letter that was written in broken English, and there's like an image of it online. But Archbishop Lefebvre was a doctor in theology, and he didn't change his principles. Right. From in a period of 5 years, he didn't change his principles. So we have to, one of the things I know is going to happen after I die, when the good Lord takes me, is people will go back and they're going to start quote mining Father Robinson is like, he was definitely an evolutionist. And, and he was a modernist for these reasons or whatever. And
we don't need to wait for you to die for that, Father. That's already happening. Come on.
That's true. This is true. But there's this practice online of people taking quotes detached from the context of the life of the person. This is done with statements from the magisterium as well. And you just detach them from the context and you try to make them prove more than they prove. So this letter does not prove that Archbishop Lefebvre decided that he was going to universally, conditionally ordain all priests. And that he had changed so much change in a period of 5 years.
Okay.
It doesn't establish that.
Yeah. Let's head forward another 28 years to 2016. We have another argument that is often used is there's this ordination sermon of Bishop Tissier de Malloret, Lord rest him. He says in this sermon of 2016, we cannot, of course, accept this new sabotaged rite of ordination, which poses doubts about the validity of many ordinations according to the new rite. Here, one of the bishops of the SSPX, who was essentially spiritually raised by Archbishop Lefebvre, seems to be saying there's a lot of doubts here. We cannot, of course, accept this new sabotage rite of ordination. What do you say to that?
Yes. So in that sermon, in which is a really instructive sermon about the new rite of ordination, he points out three aspects of the traditional ordination and how those three aspects really explicitly indicate what the rite is about and how they were removed from the new rite. And then he goes on to say, this is why we're doing this traditional rite. This is why we don't accept the new rite. And by that, he's not saying, we think it's invalid. That's not what he's saying. That's not our position. What he's saying is we don't use it. We in the SSPX, we have decided not to use the new rite of ordination. We use the traditional rite. So this is what he's clarifying why we made this decision. Well, Archbishop Lefebvre made the decision not to use the new rite of ordination. So he's not really saying anything different here from Archbishop Lefebvre and the position of the SSPX. He says the rite has been sabotaged. And there's one translation that is just improper. It says the faked rite of ordination, as if he's saying it's a fake ordination. And that's just not a proper translation. Even the sedevacantist site, Novus Ordo Watch, renders it as the rite that was tampered with. On the SSPX site, it says a sabotage rite. But, this is not a position of the SSPX. It's not a position of the SSPX that the new rite is invalid. So if people want to find quotations that will establish that sort of position, they have to find a quote that says the new rites are intrinsically valid, or all the ordinations in the new rites are invalid. I mean, like even in that letter, the Archbishop Lefebvre wrote, he says they're doubtful. So if they're doubtful, that means some of them are valid, right? I mean,
right.
It's not, if he believed that they were invalid, he would have said invalid, not doubtful.
Right. And Archbishop Lefebvre, we know, I never met him. I don't think you did either. But from what we understand, he was not one to mince words when things were really important and needed to be very clear. Like that was, let's be real. That was the whole point of a lot of what he was doing was we need to make doctrine clear again, because it isn't. And if he wanted to say something clearly, he would have said it. Yes,
right. Exactly. So again, we have the whole context of his life and his work in the SSPX, and there's nothing that indicates to us, in any way, shape, or form that he thought that all the new rites were invalid.
Okay. Let's get on to the second major objection that we'll talk about here, the second of four, which is one that's often used. Archbishop Lefebvre was a sedevacantist at heart. So this is what people are saying. He was a sedevacantist at heart, but he just didn't have the courage to adopt that position. I think right off the bat, jumping to your side again, he expelled 9 priests in 1983 who were sedevacantists. So that kind of disproves it, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was in fact one of those priests, Father Sanborn, now Bishop Sanborn, maybe, but he who said that, who made the claim in this article, The Mountains of Jebelway, which I think appeared in 94, that, there was these hardliners at Icon, there was softliners, and that the Archbishop some kind of wavered between the two, between the hardliners and the softliners. He was trying to portray Archbishop Lefebvre as kind of wishy-washy, and that his good instincts were in play when he was tending towards the hardliners, and his bad instincts when he was tending toward the softliners, and he just didn't have the strength to finally commit to the hardliners. And this is just again, I mean, you can say whatever you want about people who have died, and portray them however you want. But it's not the Archbishop Lefebvre that we know, who was very consistent in his positions. So it is true that Archbishop Lefebvre would sometimes think out loud. And he would say things like, okay, perhaps someday we may have to conclude that the Pope is not the Pope. So he was investigating this opinion, or is thinking of some scenario about what the Pope might do in the future that would force him to conclude that the Pope was not the Pope. But obviously he never came to that conclusion. Now, again, they have to find quotations. Archbishop Lefebvre saying the see of Peter is vacant. The one who calling himself Pope now is not the Pope. The chair is empty, something like that. And of course, there is no such quotation. And I mean, I think it's something of a backhanded compliment to Archbishop Lefebvre that, people recognize, even in the sedevacantist camp, that Archbishop Lefebvre was a central figure in the maintenance of tradition in a very difficult time of the church. I mean, obviously, he towers above pretty much everybody else in this post-conciliar period for defending the faith. And it's almost like they kind of want to claim him for their own in some way. But the truth is that he was never a sedevacantist. He certainly thought hard about that opinion, but it's clear both by his actions and his words that he was not sedevacantist. In his actions, I think he would obviously not have gone through all the trouble of approaching Rome to ask for permission to do the consecrations, and it was very stressful for him. It dragged on for a very long time. It was really hard for him to do that, but he wanted to manifest his filial attachment to Rome, and Archbishop Lefebvre was very Roman. He was very attached to the See of Rome. So even after the Assisi scandal, he didn't conclude that John Paul II was not the Pope, but rather still went to him and asked permission to do the consecrations. Then he explicitly repudiated sedevacantism as well. I'll just read this passage from Open Letter to Confused Catholics. He says, "The reasoning of those who deny that we have a Pope puts the Church in an inextricable situation. The visibility of the Church is too necessary for its existence, for it to be possible that God would allow it to disappear for decades. Who would be able to tell us where the future Pope is? How can he be elected if there are no more cardinals? We detect a schismatic spirit behind those reasonings, and our society utterly refuses to follow them. While rejecting Paul VI's liberalism, we wish to remain attached to Rome and the successor of St. Peter out of fidelity to his predecessors." Mm-hmm. So this was something obviously written during the pontificate of Paul VI. But, the Archbishop remained consistent till the end of his days. He wasn't a sedevacantist.
It is also interesting. There's that passage from Open Letter to Confused Catholics. There's also the recent revelation of the meeting that happened between Archbishop Lefebvre and Pope Paul VI at Castel Gandolfo in 1976. And I just pulled the link up and I'm making sure I'm looking at it correctly. And that's the one where Pope Paul VI is pretty ticked off. He calls Archbishop Lefebvre in and says, "You're turning people against me. You're telling people not to follow me. You're, all of these accusations that Paul VI had been hearing, and rightfully so, Paul VI is upset if these things are true, right?" Archbishop Lefebvre, it's heartrending when you read what Archbishop Lefebvre says during this meeting, because he's saying, "No, I'm not condemned. I am here. I'm trying to serve the church. I'm here." And I think at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, Father, according to one account or another, Archbishop Lefebvre almost falls on his knees and is like, I'm here. What do you want me to do? I'm not trying to set up a parallel church. I'm not trying to be schismatic, pleading with him to understand that this is not the position. That's not the actions, and those are not the words of a man who is sedevacantist.
No, and I mean, I think this is the edifying thing with the Archbishop. He had a great respect for the office of the papacy, and it would have been easy for him to fall into a spirit of bitterness and hatred, which is a temptation for traditional Catholics who just get overwhelmed with the injustices done against tradition by the popes. It's like having a situation of an abusive father, and you can be tempted to hate him, and instead of still trying to respect him, but not follow his example. This is extremely important that we follow the example of the Archbishop and not descend to that bitterness, and then the loss of respect for the office of the papacy. Mm-hmm. We don't follow the bad example of the popes, but at the same time, we must remain respectful of that office.
Yeah. There are some other problems, and this is not, hopefully we've presented the position on its face, but, and so we're not trying to dive into a whataboutism argument, but there is something to be said about some of the other validity problems of the other groups, of the sedevacantist groups, because if sedevacantists are looking at the SSPX and saying, well, you have some real problems with validity, well, you kind of a beam in your own eye scenario.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just the situation is that the sedevacantists, when they broke off from Archbishop Lefebvre, they had to find a way to get ordinations for their own candidates for the priesthood. Mm-hmm. And the only way they were able to do it was go to basically bishops whose own consecration was questionable. So the vast majority of sedevacantist ordinations come from the so-called Tuc line, from Archbishop Tuc. He was a prelate in Vietnam. His brother was the president of Vietnam. And when Archbishop Tuc went to the Second Vatican Council, his whole family got assassinated. There was a revolution in South Vietnam, and his whole family, his brother got assassinated, and his other family members got assassinated. And so he was not able to go back to Vietnam. And he was just there in Rome. Paul VI said, look, we're not going to send you back there. You're just going to hang out here in Rome. I'll appoint another archbishop to replace you. And he was there. And then at a certain point, there was a professor at Econ in the early days of Econ. This is the 70s, who, he had contact with these guys in Spain, and they were claiming to have visions. These guys, these laymen in Palmar in Spain, a place called Palmar. Mm-hmm. And so this priest, he thought, well, we need to get these guys ordained. How are we going to do it? Well, maybe I'll go visit Archbishop Tuc in Rome and ask him to do it. So he went and saw Archbishop Tuc, and he said to Archbishop Tuc, Our Lady wants you to come with me and ordain some priests. And Archbishop Tuc, he said, well, if Our Lady wants it, then I have to obey.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, we'll get in the car. And they drove 3-day journey to Spain. And he did an ordination ceremony in midnight between like 1975 and 1976, December 31st, January 1st, and ordained 5 priests. Mm. And then 11 days later, they were like, Our Lady and Paul VI, who was bilocated to give us this message, wants you to make bishops. And he's like, well, okay. I mean, if Our Lady and Paul VI want me to do that, then I should do it. So he made 5 bishops. And then 2 years later, this group in Palmar, they had 92 bishops. Yep. In a period of 2 years. One of them was just 16 years old. Was made bishop. He was just 16 years old. So, I mean, this is like a huge scandal, but from these bishops, came a lot of the ordinations. It came a lot of the eventual episcopal consecrations, and these sedevacantist priests typically trace their ordination back to Archbishop Tuc. Mm-hmm. And because of the fact of the trauma he had undergone, and the fact that he said he was sedevacantist, and then he reconciled with Rome. Then he was back to being sedevacantist. And also this just like this really, really bizarre story, about him seemingly being taken advantage of, right? They're taking advantage of an old man, to do these consecrations.
His whole family had just been killed.
Yeah, I mean, they had been killed a long time before, but, he wasn't able to go back to his home country. Yeah. So the fact is that if you're not in your right mind, then you can't validly ordain. You can't validly consecrate. Right. So, it's just, that's an example of a positive doubt. That's an example of a positive doubt. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't know that you were going to be talking about this group. I was just watching something on YouTube a few weeks ago because, yes, I'm a nerd about the Palmarians. And, whoa, that goes deep, Father.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
And this is an SSPX podcast talking about people being crazy. So, that's, that's real.
They've got 100 bishops and 100 faithful apparently, but they've got their own rite of the mass. And I mean, it's just, it's really, really scandalous. It's honestly, it's scandalous. And I'm really saying it's not healthy to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Third objection. The SSPX used to conditionally ordain everyone. So according to some accounts and some people online, they're saying SSPX always used to conditionally ordain new rite priests, but changed this practice after 2005. Is that true?
Yeah. So there was an article that appeared in the Angelus in 2005 defending the new rite of episcopal consecration. That's why they trace it back to 2005. But
okay.
Well, obviously, from what we've talked about, it's not true because Archbishop Lefebvre himself didn't even conditionally ordain everybody. But what I will say is that we do it less than we used to.
Okay.
And the reason for that is very simple, and that is because now we have the videos. So we're able to look at the ceremony in great detail. We're able to see the actual ceremonies that took place. Most priests who come to us are able to provide the video of their ordination. And, it's just really, if you watch the video of the ordination and you see nothing wrong, then you shouldn't conditionally ordain. And sometimes I say to people, if you came to me and said, please rebaptize me, I was baptized in the new rite, and you give me the video of your baptism, and I look at it and I was like, there's nothing wrong, then it would obviously be wrong for me to rebaptize you. So, I mean, it's just a terrible source for scruples. It starts all these sacramental scruples. If you can just rebaptize or reordain just on that negative doubt, then where do you stop? Are our confessions valid? Are the baptisms when I was baptized, was that valid? And then when we do the baptism again, was that baptism valid?
Now is that one? Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I'm like 95% sure that it's valid, but I still have that 5% doubt. So maybe we better do it again.
Yeah.
And this is a path of scruples and you're never going to reach peace of soul. So it's important that when we, have the actual ceremony and we see nothing wrong with it, that we do not conditionally ordain.
You have to trust. Yeah, it is. There's something to be said about just accepting that sometimes things are okay. And I think that's maybe kind of a psychological thing that a lot of us we traditional Catholics get stuck in sometimes, myself included. I'm so used to finding problems with things that if I don't find a problem, I don't know. But I can't trust it, Father. I can't trust it. And sometimes we have to just be able to trust that Christ is watching over the church still.
And I think that's really the huge advantage SSPX is able to provide to people in today's crisis. We do provide actual traditional Catholic communities where you can go, you can raise your family, you have the schools, you have the camps, the retreat houses, the nuns, the priests, and so on, and you can be at peace, and you can just actually work on becoming holy, without having to suss everything out and investigate and figure out, always be on edge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fourth objection, wrapping up here, that you often hear. And again, I can understand the feeling and the fear behind this. The objection is because there's so much at stake when a priest gives the sacraments, the SSPX should always conditionally ordain new rite priests just to be safe. So just to kind of pull this out a little bit more, if we're talking about Father Fulton, for instance, or Father Fulton getting thrown under the bus, he's going to be stationed down here in Phoenix, and that's where I'm at. So all the sacraments, okay, I'm worried about this now. And maybe there's not positive doubt, but the potential danger the objection would say is, but man, he's going to be hearing confessions and baptisms and all the things. Let's just conditionally ordain him just to be safe. Why not, Father?
Yeah, well, hopefully people would understand that it's not safe. It's not safe to conditionally ordain everybody. And I've just mentioned the reason for that is that, first of all, it seems to imply that the new rites are intrinsically invalid, something we don't believe. It disrespects the sacraments, where you're conditionally ordaining without positive doubt, right? And it leads to these scruples. It leads you down a path to where you can never be at rest with these non-repeatable sacraments, the baptism, the confirmation, the ordination. Where do you stop? So, in other words, it's a danger both ways. So there's a risk. I admit that not conditionally ordaining everybody, okay, and that we're shouldering that risk, and we're saying, okay, we looked at the ordination, we looked at the video, and we judged it to be valid, and we assume the responsibility for that. But there's also the risk where if we conditionally ordained everybody, the path of scruples, misrepresenting the faith, misrepresenting our position. So there's dangers on both sides, and I don't know if people always see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would really be and truly be setting up a parallel church. If the SSPX did do that, that would really be setting up a parallel church, which is not what Archbishop Lefebvre and at all have been saying.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to reflect about if they truly believe that all the new rites are invalid, what does that mean? What are the consequences of that? The consequences are very grave for the church. That means that all those Catholics out there, none of them are receiving the sacraments except for the sacrament of baptism. So the priests are not real priests, the bishops are not real bishops, cardinals not a cardinal, the pope's not a pope. The Blessed Sacrament is not the Blessed Sacrament. There's no confirmations. There's no confessions. And effectively, it's all a charade. It's the Catholic Church as we know it, does not exist. What everybody thinks is the Catholic Church, in fact, is just fake. It's not really there. And the only thing that is the Catholic Church are those few chapels around the world where there's priests ordained in the traditional rite. That's the consequences. And it's hard to say how the church hasn't failed if that's the case. If what everybody thinks is the Catholic Church is in fact not the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Church is no longer recognizable.
Yeah. Last little objection. But all Novus Ordo priests are modernists, so we have to reordain them.
Yes. And then people would probably say, well, that's your doubt, Father Robinson. That shows that we should ordain. But the thing is that throughout the history of the church, it's been worked out, though there are many controversies, that heresy does not invalidate sacraments. So it's not the intention that the minister needs is not based on his faith. He has to have the intention to do what the church does, but he can be a heretic and still validly ordain and consecrate. So, the Donatists, they rebaptize, baptism is done by what they consider to be heretics, especially in Africa, in Northern Africa. In the early church, they said, well, we need to rebaptize those who are baptized by heretics. And this was resurrected by the Waldensians. And so the church, when it reconciled the Waldensians, it had them make a profession of faith, and they had to say the following: the wickedness of a bishop or priest does no harm to the baptism of an infant, nor to consecrating the Eucharist, nor to the other ecclesiastical duties celebrated for subjects. And then the Council of Trent said, if anyone shall say that the baptism, which is also given by heretics in the name of the Father and the Son of the Holy Ghost, with the intention of doing what the church does, is not true baptism, let him be anathema. So I think people sometimes think that it's faith that makes a minister a valid administrator of a sacrament. The rectitude of his faith, but that is not the case. If his faith is off, that might cause a doubt in the validity of the sacrament. And Archbishop Lefebvre speaks about that on several occasions. And even the Church says that Mormon baptisms are not valid because we know they don't want to do what the Church does because we know their theology. Something similar was done with the Anglican ordinations, where the Church was judging their intention. But the fact is, in principle, heresy does not invalidate a sacrament.
And just from the other side of the coin, let's say you have, I don't know, a very modernist, very Novus Ordo priest, Father Bob Boomer, for instance, who's very, there's a parody account, whatever, who's very modernist. If Bishop Fillet, for instance, were to conditionally reordain him in the traditional rite, that doesn't fix Father Bob Boomer. It just doesn't. Like, that's kind of a non sequitur as well. Right.
Yes. So that's a key point is that, what's really important is the spirit of these priests. Of course, we want to be morally assured that these priests are priests. But that's kind of the simpler aspect of bringing priests to tradition. But a lot of times, the faithful tend to focus upon the ordination question, and we obviously are more focused on, I mean, from our perspective, the judgment on the ordination is the easy part. You look at the video, and you send it to the superiors and they make their judgment. But the harder part is giving the priest this training, and giving them the spirit of tradition. This is why we have the priest training program.
Yep. So as we wrap up, those are hopefully going to help allay some concerns, clear up some doubts. What are some things that I can take away, that someone listening to this can take away from this exercise of going through this stuff, instead of just, well, all right, there you go, little faithful, you're fine. But what are some things that we can take home and understand better about the sacraments and about this whole process?
Yeah, well, I am hoping that this podcast will help give some peace of soul to the faithful. But effectively, in the course of these 4 objections, we've seen 4 reasons why the SSPX does not conditionally reordain in all cases. Some, but not all. The first is to show respect for the sacraments. We don't just want to blindly reordain, because that would imply that these sacraments are repeatable, which is against the faith of the Church. So the profession of faith in Trent has the person say, I believe that these sacraments are not repeatable. So we don't want to lose hold of that traditional dogma.
Right.
The second thing is to avoid going down that rabbit hole and falling into scruples about our sacraments, to open a sort of Pandora's box where we begin to say, well, basically, you don't even have to have a reason to repeat a sacrament. Just based on your feeling, based on your gut, you can justify conditionally ordaining or conditionally baptizing or whatever. And so create a scenario where we can never be at peace about the sacraments. At the end of the day, we have to ultimately trust God. That God's able to sort everything out. Yeah. I was at my baptism, but I don't remember it. And so do I know with mathematical certainty, absolute certainty that I was truly baptized? Well, no. I mean, and plus I don't have a soul X-ray to see, okay, well, there's the character, I got 3 characters. Wow. Yeah. So we have to, God wants us to act on faith. This is part of the exercise of our faith, that we trust that these sacraments are valid if the rite is performed. So then thirdly, that we want to manifest that the SSPX has this position that the new rites are not intrinsically invalid. So that necessarily means we're not going to automatically conditionally ordain. If we believe that the rites were invalid, we would do that. But we think they're doubtful, but not automatically invalid. And so we investigate case by case as the Archbishop did. And then we want to avoid as well of falling into doctrinal error about the sacraments, falling into this belief that's been condemned by the Church that it is the faith of the minister that makes for the validity of the sacrament. When we know that, for instance, even a Muslim or a Jew can validly administer baptism, right? So too, a priest who holds an erroneous position, like on contraception or on religious liberty, or he can validly baptize, or a bishop who has the false positions on ecumenism. He thinks that people can be saved in non-Catholic religions. That of itself does not invalidate a sacrament, and so we don't want to imply that it does. We just say, okay, well, they've got these errors, so they can't validly ordain now.
Yeah, that's really fair. Father, thank you for taking the time to put this together. I know, well, I hope it will provide some peace of soul, like you said, to some folks out there. Also, thank you for doing the priest training program and heading that up. That's huge. And it's one of those programs that the SSPX has that isn't really discussed all that much. We have been here in the last few weeks with Father Fulton and now with this, but it's a big deal what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful apostolate. I appreciate the trust of my superiors to do it, and we hope. I just want to ask the faithful to pray that other priests will want to join the program and join the SSPX, and we can get more of these priests on our side and helping the cause of tradition.
Absolutely. Father, thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Questions with Father on the SSPX podcast and on our YouTube page. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube account and to the podcasts on Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts are found. And please consider leaving a rating or a review on the podcast. This will make sure that more people can find these episodes and discover the beauty and the truth of traditional Catholicism. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and God bless you.